The royal infant stopped breathing before Tessara Brune's hands had finished cooling. No bell rang inside the red glass birthing vault. Bells belonged to successful births, to heirs who opened their eyes beneath dragonfire, and cried strongly enough for the court beyond the doors to hear. This child made no sound. Tessara stood beside the black cradle with both palms pressed to the newborn's chest. Her own fire had already gone into him in 3 measured cuts of memory. The warmth of her first apprenticeship winter, the bright kitchen where her mother taught her to listen for a second heartbeat, and the face of the first child she had ever delivered alive. Each memory had left her colder. A lesser midwife gave heat. Tessara gave remembered life. Still the little chest did not rise. Royal Physician Elthene Quor watched from the opposite side of the birthing table, her white gold sleeves untouched by ash or birthing water. The heir's breath is gone. The thread is slipping, Tessara replied. There is no thread. There was. She could still feel its absence. Dragon heirs were born with a fine inner fire joining breath to blood. Most midwives never saw it. Tessara had spent 30 years learning how flame changed when a child hovered between life and death. This heir had possessed a thread at the first breath. Then something had pulled it away. Behind them, the molten scale register stood silent in its red glass alcove. Its bronze frame had been built from shed royal scales, and its narrow shuttles recorded each lawful passing of dragonfire from parent to heir. No one used it during difficult labor. It was a witness, not a healer. It did not save children. It recorded where royal fire lawfully passed. One bronze shuttle trembled. Tessara looked up. Elthene stepped between her and the register. The king is coming. Then move. You will not touch the child again. Tessara's hands remained over the newborn. His fire was taken before his breath failed. The vault doors opened. Dragon King Kharven Sol entered without crown or ceremonial armor. He wore only a black birthing coat fastened badly at the throat, as though someone else had dressed him while he was already moving. His face held the terrible stillness of a man who knew grief would become public before it became his own. He looked first at the cradle, then at Tessara's hands. Years earlier, he had sat beside her through the births of his younger sisters and 2 royal cousins, refusing sleep while she counted breaths. He knew the shape of her silence when a child was in danger. What happened? Elthene answered first. The midwife overcut the heir's fire memory. The child could not sustain the loss. Tessara slowly lifted her hands. They were pale to the wrists. Not burned. Emptied. I gave him 3 memories, she said. No more. Elthene turned one palm upward. 7 thin red lines crossed Tessara's skin. Tessara looked down. 7. She had made 3. Kharven saw the difference in her face. For one suspended moment, the old trust between them almost entered the room. Then fists struck the outer vault doors. The court wanted an answer. A breathless heir was not permitted to remain a private emergency in a dragon kingdom. It became a question of bloodline, legitimacy, and whether House Sol's newborn fire had weakened enough to invite challenge. Elthene lowered her voice. If they learn the heir thread failed at birth, every surviving branch of the royal line will be questioned. The succession could fracture before dawn. Tessara understood the choice being placed before Kharven. Not truth against falsehood. Truth against political survival. Kharven looked at the child. Did you cut beyond the lawful measure? No. Can you prove it? The register can. Elthene's head turned sharply. The scale register records successful inheritance. It records transfer. It has never been used to challenge a royal physician. I am not asking it to judge you, Tessara said. I am asking it to show where the missing fire went. A second shuttle trembled in the alcove. Kharven noticed. Elthene did too. She drew the scale cloth over the infant. Majesty, the court is waiting. Every moment without judgment becomes rumor. Tessara faced the king. Let them wait. His eyes met hers. She saw grief there, and fear, and the memory of every night he had trusted her hands to carry another person's life through pain. But he had become king inside rooms where hesitation was treated as weakness. Give me your midwife seal. The words did not sound cruel. That made them worse. Tessara touched the bronze seal at her waist. It bore 7 small dragon heads, one for each branch of the royal bloodline she had served. Kharven. The use of his name changed nothing. Give it to me. She removed the seal and placed it in his hand. He carried it to the red glass judgment plate before the court was admitted. He did not look at the register when he did it. With one press of royal fire, he melted the 7 dragon heads into a single ruined shape. The doors opened. Nobles, birth witnesses, and palace healers filled the outer vault. Kharven held up what remained of Tessara's life's work. Tessara Brune is stripped of royal practice and banished from the capital before sunset. No one cheered. These were adults who understood that disgrace did not need noise to become permanent. Tessara looked past them to the scale register. The first molten thread slipped from its bronze shuttle. It crossed the floor without touching the king, the physician, or the cradle. It wound once around Tessara's cold right hand. Then 6 more shuttles began to move. Across the kingdom, 6 living heirs screamed at the same moment. 7 cuts had been placed on Tessara's hands. 6 had found living throats. The 7th had not answered yet. 6 heirs screamed because 6 stolen threads had found living throats. The 7th had not yet answered. The sound did not travel into the red glass birthing vault through ordinary air. It came through the bloodline. One cry rose from the western nursery. Another, from the mountain branch of House Sol. A third broke from a princess sleeping beneath the eastern watchtower. 3 more followed from distant estates, each belonging to a living child whose name stood somewhere inside the royal succession. Kharven went still. He knew every voice. The court did not. To them, the cries were only a terrifying disturbance moving through the molten walls. To the Dragon King, they were the kingdom's next rulers, calling out in pain at the same moment. Elthene Quor turned toward Tessara. You see what she has done. The overcut has entered the bloodline. Tessara looked at her own hands. 6 of the 7 red marks had brightened. Each line pulsed with a different rhythm. One beat quickly like a frightened child. Another burned low and slow. A third fluttered with the uneven cadence of an heir who had survived winter fever. These were not wounds made by one careless cut. They were addresses. No, Tessara said. 6 cuts found living heirs. Elthene's voice sharpened. You admit the connection. I admit someone used my hands as the named source. A court guard moved toward her. Kharven raised one hand. No one touched her. Tessara met his eyes. The order was not mercy. He had already destroyed her seal and pronounced exile before opening the record that might clear her. He was protecting evidence now, not the woman carrying it. That distinction remained between them. Kharven looked toward the molten scale register. Open the transfer paths. Elthene stepped forward. Majesty, the register is not meant for uncontrolled exposure. If all 6 branches are linked publicly, rival houses will learn which heirs carry unstable fire. They are already screaming. The court can still be removed. No, Tessara said. If they leave, the physician can call what follows private interpretation. Elthene turned on her. You have no seal. Tessara looked at the melted bronze in Kharven's hand. He destroyed my authority. He did not destroy what I know. The first bronze shuttle moved. A molten line rose from the covered cradle, crossed the red glass floor, and entered the western wall. A second followed toward the northern branch. Then a third, 4th, 5th, and 6th. None began at Tessara's hands. They passed through her severance marks only after leaving the child. The scale register did not accuse Elthene. It followed the transfer. Tessara stepped closer without touching the frame. Look at the origin. Kharven did. All 6 threads emerged from the same point beneath the scale cloth. The breathless heir had not lost his fire through Tessara. His fire had been divided from him. Elthene recovered quickly. Redistribution is sometimes lawful when a newborn flame collapses. The surviving branches may absorb excess heat to prevent a royal fire from burning wild. Not without a birth seal, Tessara said. The emergency physician's seal may substitute. Then show the entry. Elthene did not move. The register's bronze plates began recording each path. First transfer. Newborn heir to Princess Vela Sol, Western Branch. Second transfer. Newborn heir to Prince Kharven Sol, Mountain Branch. The names continued until all 6 living heirs stood written in molten script. Beside, each appeared the same authority source. Midwife severance. Tessara lifted her right hand. I did not place those cuts. You cannot prove the movement of your own fingers during a difficult birth. I can prove the memories. Kharven looked at her. What does that mean? A lawful memory. Cut leaves content behind. Tessara touched the first mark. Heat flashed across her palm. For one instant, the vault smelled of bread, smoke, and winter rosemary, the memory she had given from her first apprenticeship year. She touched the second. A kitchen appeared and reflected fire across the red glass wall, warm with her mother's voice. The third carried the face of the first child she had delivered alive. Then Tessara touched the fourth mark. Nothing came. No room. No face. No remembered warmth. Only a clean, hollow pull. She touched the fifth and sixth. The same emptiness. Tessara gave 3 memories, she said. The other 4 were taken through her name. Elthene folded her hands into her sleeves. Memory loss can become confused under exhaustion. A lesser midwife might confuse heat with memory, Tessara replied. I do not. Kharven watched the 6 molten paths entering his living heirs. A birth failure kills 1 heir, he said quietly. A stolen thread endangers a bloodline. Elthene's face remained composed. Which is why Tessara's overcut must be contained. Tessara turned toward him. Kharven had melted the seal before asking where the fire went. The court heard the sentence. So did he. He did not defend himself. The 7th mark on Tessara's palm remained dark. No living heir had screamed from it. No branch name appeared beside it. Yet the line existed, cut as cleanly as the others. The missing fire had not vanished. It had entered somewhere the succession register did not name as an heir. The final bronze shuttle shuddered. Elthene moved toward the scale register. I must close the record before the transfer destabilizes further. Tessara stepped between her and the frame. Do not touch it. You are banished. And my hands are evidence. Kharven's voice stopped them both. Stand away from the register, Elthene. For the first time, the royal physician hesitated. The 7th shuttle released its thread. It did not travel toward any nursery or royal estate. It crossed the vault at shoulder height, thin as molten wire. For one moment, it pulled toward Kharven's chest. Then it changed direction. The thread slipped past the crownless king and wound itself around the untouched cuff of Elthene Quor's white gold sleeve. It had not found her flesh. It had found what she carried. The 7th thread had not accused Elthene's body. It had answered the thing hidden in her sleeve. The molten line tightened around the white gold cuff without burning the cloth. Elthene held her arm still, though the tendons in her wrist shifted beneath the fabric. Birth ash contamination, she said. The register is following residue from the vault. Tessara looked at the thread. Royal fire does not cling to cloth. Elthene's eyes narrowed. It answers vessels. Kharven stepped between the physician and the court. Open the sleeve. Elthene did not obey. Majesty. Physician privilege protects sealed instruments used during royal labor. Exposure may compromise future births. The current birth has already been compromised by the woman whose severance marks entered 6 heirs. Tessara raised her hands. 6 marks entered heirs because someone named me as the source. The 7th is not in a throat. It is in whatever she carries. The thread pulled once. A faint metallic sound answered from inside Elthene's cuff. Not a vial striking glass. Scale touching scale. Tessara knew the sound. Midwives used shed infant scales to make breath counters. Tiny instruments that warmed with each successful pulse. Royal physicians used thicker scales for transfer vessels because dragonfire would not pass safely through ordinary metal. A scale vial, Tessara said. Elthene's face remained composed. Emergency tincture. A tincture does not call a transfer thread. Kharven's voice hardened. Open it. Elthene folded her arm against her body. Under physician law, sealed birth instruments may be examined only by the royal medical chamber. The medical chamber answers to you, Tessara said. It answers to the crown. The crown destroyed my seal before opening the register. Kharven took the sentence without defense. Then he held out his hand to Elthene. The instrument. For a moment, the only movement in the vault came from the molten scale register. Its 7th shuttle turned slowly, drawing the thread tighter. Elthene reached inside her sleeve. She removed a narrow vial no longer than a finger joint. It had been made from a translucent royal scale, dark red near the base and clear along the rim. A fine transfer needle ran beside it, hidden in the seam of her cuff. The vial contained a small coil of living fire, not flame, memory. It moved like something dreaming. The court leaned closer. Tessara did not. She watched the color. Newborn fire began almost white, then darkened as breath and blood learned one another. This coil was still pale at its center. It had been taken before the child's body completed its first lawful joining. Elthene placed the vial on the judgment table. Emergency redistribution is permitted when an heir's flame becomes unstable. I preserved what could be preserved. You preserved it outside the child, Tessara said, to prevent total loss. After his breath failed, Elthene did not answer directly. Royal medicine does not wait for certainty when the bloodline is at risk. Tessara stepped closer to the vial. The cold in her hands deepened as the stolen memory responded to the marks across her palms. A lawful emergency begins after 3 failed breath counts. One of the senior birth witnesses nodded. That is the rule. Tessara looked at the transfer needle. Its tip was darkened with red glass dust. The needle entered the scale, vial before the 3rd count. Elthene gave a slight, dismissive shake of her head. You cannot date residue by sight. Not the residue, the memory. Kharven looked at Tessara. What did she take? Tessara placed 2 fingers near the vial without touching it. The pale fire uncoiled. A sound passed through the vault. Not a cry, but the remembered rhythm of a small heart attempting its first steady pattern. 1 beat. A pause. Another beat. Then the sharp interruption of metal passing close to the air thread. Tessara closed her eyes. His first breath had not finished. The vial brightened. A reflection formed across the red glass wall. Not a full image. Memory fire did not recreate scenes for spectacle. It preserved sensation, pressure, warmth, timing, and the hand nearest the transfer. The vault heard Tessara counting. 1. The infant's chest had risen. 2. The fire thread had tightened. Before the 3rd count, the transfer needle entered the field beside the cradle. The coil in the vial pulled away. The remembered breath broke. Tessara opened her eyes. You did not redistribute fire after an emergency. You created the emergency by drawing before the lawful point. Elthene's expression did not collapse. The air thread was already unstable. Then the register would show a natural fracture before transfer. It may not record every weakness. It records lawful passage. That is why you used my name instead of yours. A murmur moved through the court, but no one stepped forward to defend Tessara. The physician still held rank, law, and decades of royal trust. Elthene turned to Kharven. Majesty, the 6 living heirs now carry strengthened fire. Whatever the timing, the bloodline has been preserved. At the cost of this child's breath, Tessara said. At the cost of 1 unstable branch to secure 6 viable ones. Kharven's face changed. The argument was not foreign to him. Kings heard it in war rooms, tax chambers, and succession councils. 1 loss made reasonable by the number protected. Tessara watched him recognize the language. He had used another version of it when he melted her seal. Kharven looked at the vial. Who authorized pre-emergency transfer? Elthene lifted her chin. The instrument carries lawful authority. That was not my question. Tessara examined the vial's base. A seal had been pressed into the scale while it was still warm. At first, the mark looked like an ordinary physician's knot. Then the 7th thread passed through it, and the deeper impression appeared beneath the medical wax. A crowned dragon over an open birth flame. Kharven's emergency birth seal. He stared at it. The authority that allowed Elthene to draw fire before the lawful emergency point had been issued in his own name. It did not prove he had ordered the theft. It proved the theft had learned to wear his authority. Kharven had not placed the needle beside his son's first breath, but his seal had allowed it to enter. The crowned dragon mark at the base of the scale vial glowed faintly beneath the physician's wax. It was not a forged impression. Kharven knew the pressure pattern of his own hand. The slight break in the lower flame where the seal had cracked the winter before. Elthene Quor watched him recognize it. The emergency birth seal authorizes preemptive preservation when the royal bloodline faces measurable collapse. Tessara kept her cold hands open beneath the register's light. Preservation begins after 3 failed breath counts. Ordinary preservation does. There is no lawful form that begins before breath is allowed to complete. Elthene turned toward the court. The midwife speaks from guild custom. Royal medicine answers to continuity. Tessara looked at Kharven. Then ask what continuity allowed. He did not look away from the vial. Bring the emergency birth charter. Elthene's expression remained composed. That charter is protected by physician privilege. Its language concerns bloodline weakness, private examinations, and the condition of living heirs. The charter has already entered a public birth record. Because an unsealed midwife forced the register open. Tessara's voice stayed level. The register opened because royal fire had been transferred under my name. Kharven extended his hand. The charter. Elthene did not move. A senior birth witness lowered her gaze. 2 court physicians stood behind Elthene without speaking. Their silence was not agreement. It was habit. For years, the Royal Medical Chamber had treated Elthene's decisions as final, because questioning them meant admitting that dragon heirs could be fragile. Kharven saw that structure now. He had built part of it. "Open the physician archive," he ordered. Elthene replied, "You risk exposing every weakness in House Sol." "I risked more when I signed authority. I did not read closely enough." The admission was not an apology to Tessara. It did not restore her seal or undo exile. It named only the first part of his own failure. A guard crossed to the red glass cabinet set behind the medical dais. The outer lock bore Elthene's physician knot. Beneath it sat the royal emergency mark. Kharven pressed his palm to the second seal. The cabinet opened. Inside lay a single narrow charter bound in red scale parchment. The title named, "No Child and No Mother. Emergency Preservation of Unstable Royal Branches." Elthene stepped forward. That document was issued after 6 living heirs showed signs of inherited flame decline. "You knew the reports. I knew their fire was weakening. You knew rival houses were preparing succession claims. I knew fear was entering the court. And you authorized measures to prevent collapse." Kharven opened the charter. The first page permitted physicians to strengthen living heirs through lawful shared fire after a failed birth. The second allowed temporary storage of excess royal flame. The third carried the sentence Tessara had expected. An unstable branch may be divided for bloodline survival, where preservation of the greater succession requires it. Tessara read it twice. "Who defined unstable branch?" Elthene answered, "The Royal Medical Chamber. After birth? When sufficient signs appear." "That is not what I asked." Elthene's eyes sharpened. "A physician must act before collapse becomes irreversible." Tessara pointed toward the cradle without looking at it. The child had not completed 3 breath counts. He had not been measured against the legal threshold. Yet the vial was prepared, the needle was placed, and my name was already set as the severance source. The court turned toward Elthene. But not all of them with accusation. Several looked afraid. If Tessara was right, the system had not failed in panic. It had arrived prepared. Kharven moved to the final page. There, beneath the physician's risk assessment, stood the date. 4 months before the birth. Elthene had classified the unborn child's branch as unstable before the child had drawn breath. Kharven's hand tightened on the parchment. "You presented this as a contingency for all royal births." "It was. You had already named this child as the branch to be divided." "I named the pregnancy carrying the weakest predicted fire." Tessara looked at her. "Predicted by whom?" "By blood readings, maternal flame pressure, and the decline among 6 living heirs. You measured 6 heirs weakening, then planned to feed them from the 7th before he existed as a lawful child." Elthene did not deny the structure. She defended it. 6 lives, 6 succession branches, 6 territories held stable by heirs whose fire was failing. 1 unborn branch carried enough concentrated memory, fire, to strengthen them all. "The vial did not hold medicine," Tessara said. "It held the moment before the child became lawful heir." Kharven read deeper into the charter. His emergency seal appeared beneath a broad authority line. He remembered the council night when Elthene brought him 6 sealed reports, each warning that a different heir had begun waking cold. He remembered rival banners gathering near the southern roads. He remembered signing because delay looked like cowardice and because Elthene's language made intervention sound temporary, measured, and reversible. He had not asked who would be divided. He had asked whether the bloodline would survive. Tessara watched him understand that omission. "Kharven had not placed the needle," she said. "But his seal had opened the hand that did." Elthene turned toward him. "Majesty, the redistribution worked. The 6 heirs still live. They live with fire drawn from a child before he could lawfully possess it. They live because you authorized survival." The charter's final folded section remained sealed. Unlike the others, it bore a recipient clause rather than a medical one. Kharven broke the wax. Tessara saw the 7th severance mark on her palm brighten. The missing fire had never been intended for one of the 6 heirs. The charter named a private recipient before the child was born. Royal Physician Elthene Quor. The charter had named Elthene before the child had ever drawn breath. But a name in a medical clause was not yet the same as a confession. Elthene Quor looked at the open page without stepping back. Private recipient does not mean private ownership, she said. It means temporary medical custody. Tessara kept her eyes on the wording. Then why is there no return condition? Because return depends upon viability. Every lawful reservoir names the body, vessel, or branch to which the fire must be restored. The charter was written for uncertainty. No, it was written to leave the fire in your keeping. Kharven lowered the parchment. What does private custody permit? It permits the royal physician to stabilize heir, fire outside the body, divide excess memory, and preserve viable portions until the bloodline can absorb them safely. Tessara looked toward the scale vial. The pale coil inside it moved with a slow, sleepless pulse. Royal fire cannot remain outside a body without taking shape from the keeper. Elthene folded her hands. That is why only a licensed physician may hold it. A midwife knows the difference between held fire and fed fire. Kharven looked at Tessara. Explain. She touched the 7th mark on her palm. Cold climbed through her fingers, but beneath it she felt the drag of a memory being drawn through a vessel that did not intend to release it. When fire is stored for return, it stays unfinished. It carries the rhythm of the child or heir it came from. When it is fed to another purpose, the rhythm is stripped away. She pointed toward the vial. This still carries the child's first 2 counts. It has not been refined yet, Elthene said, which proves preservation, not misuse. It proves only that you had not finished. Kharven turned toward the physician archive. What other instruments were prepared under this charter? None relevant to this birth. That was not my question. Elthene's mouth tightened. Majesty, the medical chamber contains private treatments for the royal house. Opening it before the court would expose illnesses, infertility, failed hatchings, and conditions no rival branch has the right to know. Tessara heard the same fear Elthene had used before. Protect the bloodline by keeping the room closed. Kharven heard it too. He had already chosen secrecy once, and melted Tessara's seal before the register could speak. Open the chamber. Elthene did not move. Kharven gave the order to the birth guards. The inner medical door stood behind a curtain of red scale beads. It opened only after 2 physician locks, and 1 royal seal were broken. Cool air moved from the chamber, carrying bitter herbs, hot metal, and something Tessara recognized. Burned memory. Inside, narrow shelves held rows of sealed scale vials. Most contained ordinary tinctures, fever ash, blood-thickening resin, powdered eggshell, and blue salt for failed flame joining. 7 vials were kept apart in a black warming frame. Their contents glowed deep gold. Elthene stepped toward them. Those are physician restoratives. Tessara entered the chamber without asking permission. Her banishment had not been revoked. Her seal remained ruined, but the court had already used her hands as evidence, and she would not remain outside while another title interpreted what she had spent a lifetime learning. She held 1 cold palm near the warming frame. The first vial answered with cedar smoke and summer rain. Not herpes, a memory. The second carried the warmth of a woman laughing beside a birthing pool. The third held the pressure of a newborn hand closing around Tessara's finger. She looked at Elthene. These came from births. Residual fire is routinely collected after successful delivery, only with consent. Royal fire belongs to the bloodline. Memory belongs to the person who lived it. Kharven came to stand behind her, but he did not touch her hands. How old are these? Tessara examined the scale color. Years, Elthene replied. Some restoratives require long settling. Tessara lifted the black frame's ledger strip. Each vial carried 2 records. The outer record named a successful royal birth. The hidden inner mark named a private medical application, physician renewal. The 6 living heirs had not begun weakening by chance. Each had been born with a small portion of fire missing, taken so carefully that no single loss looked fatal. Tessara had given memory fire during those births to steady them. Elthene had claimed the recoveries as royal medicine, then stored the excess under her own authority. The children survived because Tessara replaced what Elthene removed. The physician's longevity had been built from the cold left behind in a midwife's hands. Kharven looked at Elthene's face. She had served the royal house for more than 30 years. She had not aged like the others. Not enough. Elthene remained composed. A physician who carries the health of a bloodline must remain capable of serving it. You used their births to preserve yourself, Tessara said. I used lawful residue to preserve medical continuity. You called it residue because the mothers were exhausted. The infants could not speak. And the midwife was expected to forget what she gave. Elthene's voice stayed calm. The heirs lived. Because I kept replacing what you took. The 7th mark on Tessara's palm brightened. The vial beside the cradle answered the restoratives in the warming frame. Kharven looked from the charter to the hidden ledger marks. This was not the first planned transfer. No, Tessara said. It was the first one large enough to stop a child's breath. A final compartment opened beneath the warming frame as the 7th thread pulled toward it. Inside lay a prepared restorative flask, larger than the others and engraved with Elthene's private physician mark. It had been made to receive the entire 7th fire, not to return it, to complete her next renewal. The restorative flask had been prepared for Elthene's next renewal. But the fire inside it still remembered the child it had been taken from. Tessara stood before the black warming frame with both hands open. The 7th mark burned brighter than the others, while the 6 living threads remained stretched through the molten scale register toward the royal branches beyond the vault. Kharven looked at the flask. Can the fire be returned? Elthene answered first. Not safely. Once royal flame enters a preservation vessel, reversal can rupture the receiving body. The child has not received it, Tessara said. He has already lost the lawful joining. He lost it because the thread was drawn before the 3rd count. That does not make the joining recoverable. Tessara looked toward the cradle but did not cross the room. The child's body remained warm beneath the scale cloth. That mattered. Dragon heirs cooled slowly, and memory fire could sometimes be restored before the final ash settled around the heart. Sometimes. Not always. Kharven heard the uncertainty in her silence. What would it require? Truth first. Elthene gave a controlled breath. The child requires medicine, not another accusation. The medicine was made from him. Kharven's gaze hardened. Elthene will not touch the child or the register again. The royal physician did not bow. Then you place the succession in the hands of a banished midwife. Tessara looked at the ruined bronze seal still fused on the judgment plate. He already placed it in your hands. The words landed without heat. Kharven accepted them without defense. Tessara moved toward the molten scale register. She did not ask it to judge Elthene. She placed her palms beneath the 6 active transfer lines and read what they carried. The 1st thread answered with the smell of winter rosemary. The 2nd carried her mother's kitchen. The 3rd held the face of the 1st infant Tessara had delivered alive. Those were the memories she had given tonight. But older warmth moved beneath them. A summer courtyard where a young prince took his first step. A birthing room filled with rain. A little girl laughing when Tessara warmed her cold fingers against a newborn dragon scale. Memories Tessara had surrendered across decades of royal births. She had believed each one burned away after it steadied the child. They had not. The register opened the older paths. Molten lines appeared across the red glass walls, one after another, reaching toward every living heir of House Sol. Each line passed from a royal chest to Tessara's hands, then back again. The court drew closer. Elthene's expression remained composed. Tessara contaminated the bloodline through repeated, unauthorized transfer. No, Tessara said. I replaced what was removed. One of the senior birth witnesses stared at the walls. That cannot be. A midwife's memory. Fire is temporary. It should be, Tessara said. Unless the original heir. Fire has been taken. The register followed the transfers without praise or blame. A young princess had lost a thread during birth. Tessara's memory filled the absence. A mountain prince had been born cold after Elthene collected what she called excess flame. Tessara gave him the remembered heat of her own mother's hands. Another heir had survived because Tessara surrendered the memory of her wedding morning. though she could no longer recall the sound of her husband's voice when he saw her. The heirs had not been strengthened by royal medicine. They had been kept alive by pieces of Tessara's life. Kharven looked at her pale hands. "How much did you give?" "I stopped counting when the court stopped asking." The answer altered something in his face. Years ago, he had sat beside her through difficult births and watched her grow colder by dawn. He had thought exhaustion explained it. Elthene had told him experienced midwives carried winter in their blood. He had accepted the explanation because Tessara never complained. Her silence had become convenient evidence that no harm was being done. A thread from the western air tightened. Tessara flinched. The child at the far end had begun drawing harder on the memory sustaining her. The other 5 threads followed. Panic had disturbed their inherited fire, and each heir was reaching instinctively for the warmth that had once saved them. The molten lines pulled against Tessara's hands. Kharven stepped forward. "Stop the transfer. The register cannot stop it." "Elthene?" The physician's voice remained calm. "The heirs must be sedated until the disturbance passes." "With what?" Tessara asked. "Another medicine built from stolen memory?" Elthene did not answer. Tessara studied the 6 lines. Returning the newborn's fire would not be enough. Elthene had tied the whole succession into a system of quiet dependency. If Tessara withdrew her memory from one heir without stabilizing the others, their breathing could fail in sequence. The theft had not merely fed Elthene's life. It had made Tessara's sacrifice part of the royal bloodline's structure. Kharven saw the understanding in her face. "What must be done?" "The 6 heirs need lawful fire restored to the places my memories are holding open." "Can the 7th fire do that?" "Not alone." "What can?" Tessara looked at the warming frame. The older vials held fragments taken from years of births. Some belonged to the 6 living heirs. Others carried memories from children who had survived and grown strong enough to reclaim what had been removed. If each fragment were returned to its rightful owner, Tessara's memories could be released without tearing the bloodline. But the work would require trained midwives in every branch chamber, not physicians acting under Elthene's exclusive authority. Midwives, women who knew breath counts, memory weight, and the difference between a child struggling and a court deciding that struggle had become politically inconvenient. Kharven said, "Tell me what you need. Tell me what you need." And, Tessara faced him. "My seal does not return because you need my hands." His eyes moved toward the ruined bronze. "I know. No. You know the seal was broken. You do not yet know what made it possible." The court remained silent. Tessara's voice carried without rising. "Royal physicians can order a midwife to cut memory beyond the safe measure. We can be punished for refusing. Our records can be sealed beneath physician privilege. Our work can be named residue after the birth succeeds and failure when it does not." Elthene said, "This is not the hour to renegotiate medical law. This is the hour your law created." Kharven looked toward the cradle. "Save the child, Tessara." It was not a plea. Not yet. It was still a king's command spoken to a woman whose authority he had destroyed. Tessara did not move. "I will not place my hands on another royal birth under the law that made them disposable." The 6 threads pulled tighter. Kharven's fear showed now. Stripped of court discipline, "What do you require?" "Every royal midwife must have the lawful right to refuse an unsafe order without losing her seal, home, or freedom. No physician may cut memory through another woman's name. No birth record may be closed without the midwife's witnessed account." Elthene's eyes sharpened. "You would hold an heir's breath against the crown." "No," Tessara said. "Your law already did that." She looked at Kharven. "I am telling you the conditions under which skilled hands can work without being turned into instruments." The child's stored fire struck the inside of the restorative flask. Once, then again. A third impact cracked the scale near Elthene's private mark. The heir's fire was still trying to return. Kharven had moments to decide whether Tessara's profession would remain obedient or become lawful. The crack in the restorative flask reached the royal seal before Kharven answered. A line of white fire opened through the scale vessel, and the stolen flame pressed against it from within. Every birth witness understood what it meant. The heir's stored fire would not remain contained much longer. Kharven turned toward the court. "Bring every royal midwife into the vault." Elthene Quor stepped forward. "Midwives are not authorized to handle bloodline redistribution." "They will be." You cannot rewrite medical law during an active birth. Kharven looked at the ruined seal on the judgment plate. That law has already decided who may be sacrificed during an active birth. I am ending that authority now. Tessara did not move toward the cradle. A spoken promise is not protection. What form will hold? A witnessed birth decree. Signed before the child is touched. Binding on the physician chamber, the crown, and every royal branch. Elthene's expression remained controlled. A decree made under threat may be challenged as coercion. The threat was created under your charter, Tessara said. Kharven ordered a red glass tablet brought from the royal archive. Tessara dictated the language herself. No midwife could be ordered to cut memory fire beyond the measure she judged safe. Refusal could not cost her seal, wages, home, or freedom. Every royal birth required a separate witnessed account from the attending midwife. No physician could transfer flame through another worker's name. No emergency preservation could begin before 3 failed breath counts confirmed by both professions. Elthene said, "You are giving tradeswomen equal authority over royal blood. I am giving skilled witnesses authority over the work they perform." Kharven pressed his palm to the tablet. Royal fire entered the lettering. The decree became law before the court that had watched him banish Tessara. He did not return her seal. He placed the crown beneath a rule she had written. Is it enough? It is a beginning. The royal midwives entered from the outer chambers. Some had trained under Tessara. Others had spent years lowering their eyes whenever Elthene crossed a birthing room. Tessara addressed them without ceremony. No one gives memory tonight unless she chooses it. We return what was taken before we replace anything more. The oldest midwife nodded first. The others followed. Tessara assigned one woman to each living branch. The molten scale register could show where the stolen fragments belonged, but it could not place them safely. That required hands trained to read breath, pulse, and the weight of remembered fire. 6 bronze mirrors were set around the register. Each reflected a distant chamber, where one heir lay fevered and frightened. Tessara lifted the first old vial from Elthene's warming frame. Western branch. Princess Vela. A memory of summer rain moved inside the scale. When her breath steadies, return only what answers her pulse, Tessara instructed. Do not force the rest, Elthene said. Partial restoration may leave the heir weaker. Then she will heal at her own pace. The succession cannot wait. Children are not succession instruments while they are trying to breathe. The first transfer began. The memory fire crossed the bronze mirror in a narrow golden strand. Far away, Princess Vela's chest rose without drawing on Tessara's hand. One thread loosened. Warmth returned to 2 of Tessara's fingers. The next restorations followed. A mountain prince received the fire taken from his first winter fever. A young duchess reclaimed the memory of her mother's heartbeat. Each return weakened Elthene's hidden system and released another portion of Tessara's life. Kharven stood beside the judgment plate, silent and visibly useless. For once, he did not turn authority into expertise. When Tessara reached for the 4th vial, her hands shook. He stepped toward her. Do not touch them. He stopped. Years earlier, during difficult births, he had warmed her fingers because she permitted it. Now the court's punishment lived in their coldness. And she would not let regret claim intimacy before trust returned. What can I do? Keep Elthene away from the instruments. Keep the court from interrupting. Listen when the women working. Tell you what the work requires. He moved to the chamber door. No one enters or leaves without Tessara's consent. Elthene gave a slight smile. You have replaced one monopoly with another. No. I have 6 midwives disagreeing with me in 6 rooms. That is what lawful work looks like. The 5th heir stabilized near midnight. The 6th took longer. His original fire had been refined so heavily that only a thin fragment remained. The attending midwife refused to force it into his chest. Elthene called the refusal negligence. Kharven answered first. The decree protects her judgment. The final heir steadied by his own breath. The 6 molten threads released Tessara's hands. She almost fell. No one touched her until she chose the oldest midwife beside her. The woman caught her elbow. Only then did Tessara approach the restorative flask. The newborn's fire struck the cracked scale again. She lifted the child from the cradle and placed him against her chest. Not as mother, but as the midwife whose work had been interrupted. "Open the vessel on my third count," she told Kharven. Elthene said, "He is not trained. He carries the seal that closed it. He will bear the risk of opening it." Kharven took the flask. Tessara counted the child's faint heart. 1. The scale warmed. 2. The stolen fire turned toward the newborn. 3. Kharven broke his own emergency seal. The pale flame returned through Tessara's hands and entered the child's chest. She did not give another memory. She guided his own fire back to the place from which it had been taken. The infant drew one thin breath, then another. The vault remained silent until the third came without help. Only then did the register move again. An older thread rose from its deepest bronze plate. It passed every living heir. It crossed the vault and entered Kharven's chest. The memory at its other end belonged to Tessara. Kharven's breath changed before he understood what the older thread had found inside him. The molten line entered beneath his breastbone and tightened around a place no physician had ever named. Heat moved through the vault, carrying the scent of cedar smoke, wet stone, and a summer field after rain. Tessara recognized the memory. She had not remembered it in years. Kharven pressed one hand to his chest. "What is this?" The molten scale register opened its deepest bronze plate. The record was older than Elthene's emergency charter, older than the current physician chamber, and nearly as old as Kharven himself. Royal birth transfer. Recipient: Kharven Sol. Source: Tessara Brune. Status: unresolved substitution. A silence settled over the vault. Elthene recovered first. The king carries foreign memory fire. Kharven looked toward her. "You knew. I knew there were irregularities in your birth record." "Foreign?" Tessara said. He was dying. The oldest midwife beside her lowered her eyes. She remembered that birth. Kharven had entered the world too early, his dragonfire burning wildly while his lungs remained weak. His mother's fire could not reach him without scorching the unformed air thread. The physicians had ordered the child cooled until the flame diminished. Tessara had refused. She had given him a memory strong enough to teach his breath how to follow warmth rather than fight it. Kharven looked at her pale hands. "What did you give me?" Tessara did not answer immediately. The register was already drawing the memory toward the red glass walls. Not a scene. Sensation. A man's rough fingers closing around hers. A field warm beneath evening light. The sound of quiet laughter before a long winter began. Tessara closed her eyes. "My husband's last summer before the fever took him." Kharven's face changed. "You lost that because of me. I gave it to save a child. You did not know I would become king." "No." The answer denied the court the story it wanted. She had not sacrificed herself for a crown, destiny, or future ruler. She had saved an infant because an infant needed breath. Elthene turned toward the nobles. "This record threatens the legitimacy of the throne. A sovereign carrying non-royal memory. Fire may be judged an altered heir." Several succession witnesses began whispering. Kharven's younger cousins were among the 6 children who had just received their stolen fire back. If his own blood could be challenged, every rival branch would have reason to reopen the crown. Tessara looked at the thread inside his chest. "My memory did not replace his royal fire. It held the joining open until his own flame stabilized." "Then why does the record call it unresolved substitution?" Elthene asked. "Because someone never completed the return." Kharven stared at the deepest plate. "What should have been returned?" "The part of my memory that remained after your breath became stable." Elthene said. "If it was not removed, then the king has ruled for decades through borrowed fire." "No," Tessara replied. "He ruled through his own choices. The memory kept him alive. It did not make them for him." Her gaze moved briefly toward the ruined midwife seal. "That included the choice to destroy her authority." Kharven understood. He did not ask her to separate the good man from the king who had condemned her. He had been both. "What happens if you take the memory back?" he asked. "It may leave cleanly. And if it does not? Your oldest breath pattern may weaken." The court shifted again. Elthene stepped closer to the register. "Then the memory must remain. The crown cannot risk destabilizing the king." Tessara looked at her. "You use that argument to keep every stolen fragment where it benefited you. This is different. It is always different when the powerful body carries what was taken." Kharven lowered his hand from his chest. Can the record be completed without her losing the memory forever? Tessara studied the molten line. The register can identify lawful ownership. It cannot decide whether a memory should be returned, shared, or released. That requires consent from both living people. Elthene gave a cold breath. A sovereign does not negotiate the structure of his own blood. He does when another person's life is inside it, Tessara said. Kharven faced the succession witnesses. Record that the memory belongs to Tessara Brune. One noble objected. Majesty. Admitting foreign fire within the royal body invites immediate challenge. Then let the challenge name what it truly opposes. He looked toward the ruined seal on the judgment plate. A midwife saved my life. The crown erased the cost from the record and later treated her as disposable. If my throne requires that theft remain unnamed, then the weakness is not in my blood. It was the first time he placed the truth above the appearance of an unbroken succession. The decision did not restore Tessara's trust, but it cost him something real. Elthene lifted her chin. You risk civil division for one woman's memory. Kharven looked at her. No, I risk it because every heir in this room has been kept alive by labor the court refused to name. Tessara stepped toward him. Do you consent to the memory being examined? Yes. Not returned. Examined. I understand. She placed 2 cold fingers near his chest without touching him. He waited. Only when she nodded did he move closer. The thread opened between them. Tessara felt the old summer field again. But another sensation lay beneath it, something she had never placed there. A thin medical cut, made after Kharven's breathing stabilized. Someone had removed a portion of the memory before the lawful return could occur. The missing fragment had not remained inside him. It had been transferred elsewhere. The deepest bronze plate opened a second line. Kharven followed it across the vault. The thread entered the black warming frame that had held Elthene's restoratives. Tessara looked at the physician. You began harvesting royal births with his. Elthene's expression remained still. But the register had found the first renewal. And it carried the memory of the king's own first breath. Kharven ordered the oldest renewal record removed from the black frame and placed where every birth witness could see it. The vial did not resist. Its gold fire thinned across the red glass table, carrying the sensation of a chamber 30 years younger. Fever heat, cloth soaked in vinegar, and a physician struggling to remain upright beside a premature royal child. Elthene had been ill during Kharven's birth. Not weak. Dying. The record opened around Queen Sol's voice. Preserve the royal physician from available birth residue after the heir is stabilized. Elthene looked toward Kharven. Your mother understood continuity. Tessara read the wording again. After the heir is stabilized. He was stabilized, and the unused memory was meant to return to me. The queen redirected it. Without naming what was taken. Without asking the woman who lived it. Elthene's gaze remained steady. One physician preserved during the red glass lung saved dozens of children afterward. That may explain the first theft, Tessara said. It does not make the next 30 years lawful. The deepest plate of the molten scale register released its full record. Tessara's memory of her husband's last summer had held Kharven's breath open. Once his own fire joined, most of that memory should have returned to her. Instead, Elthene had removed a narrow portion carrying 2 things at once. Tessara's remembered warmth and the imprint of a royal heir surviving his first breath. That combination had renewed her failing body. Kharven looked at Elthene's unchanged face. You were meant to receive 1 measured fragment. I received what the queen authorized. The order names 1 emergency. The need for medical continuity did not end with the fever. But the authority did, Tessara said. She lifted the later renewal strips from the warming frame. The first copied Queen Mareth's words almost exactly. The second removed the phrase after the heir is stabilized. The third replaced available birth residue with excess royal fire. By the 7th, the document allowed an unstable branch to be divided for bloodline survival. No single change looked large enough to alarm a king reading 6 other reports at midnight. Together, they had turned 1 emergency exception into a permanent right. Kharven saw his own seals on 3 amendments. I renewed this authority. Elthene inclined her head. You renewed a system that kept the royal house alive. I renewed language I allowed you to define. He did not call himself deceived. That word would have made him smaller than his responsibility. Tessara studied the records. The first renewal was made from a fragment already used to save him. The later ones were planned before the births they fed upon. The later heirs were weakening, Elthene said. I acted before another plague reached the bloodline. You made weakness profitable to the physician who diagnosed it. A birth witness near the table lowered her head. Others began examining the hidden marks on the older vials. Each outer seal praised a successful royal delivery. Beneath it, smaller script recorded what had been removed after the room emptied. A midwife's memory of her sister. Another woman's first winter with her newborn son. The warmth of a mother's hand. A wedding song. A field beside the sea. Not all the stolen memories belonged to Tessara. The physician chamber had been taken from royal midwives for years. Tessara looked at the women gathered around her. Open every record, Elthene said. That would expose private medical history across the entire succession. It will expose whose lives paid for that history. Kharven gave the order. The remaining archive cabinets were unsealed. Red glass tablets filled the tables. Midwives moved among them, reading names that had been hidden beneath physician summaries. Some recognized memories they had lost and blamed on age. Others found records belonging to dead teachers who had never known why their hands turned cold. No one cried loudly. The room became quieter than grief. Kharven stood among the evidence without asking anyone to spare him from it. How many royal births were certified under these charters? Elthene answered. Nearly all during my service. How many included unrecorded memory transfer? That depends upon whether one accepts the midwife's interpretation. Tessara turned a tablet toward him. It depends upon whether a person owns what she remembers. Kharven read the names. Record every donor. Restore every hidden account to the public birth ledger. Elthene's expression changed at last. Not fear. Calculation. If you void physician custody, you void the certifications attached to it. A succession witness looked up sharply. Elthene continued. The living heirs were declared viable under medical authority that you now call unlawful. Your own birth was certified after my renewal. The newborn's return was completed under a decree issued inside a contested vault. Kharven understood the trap. If he preserved the old records, the theft remained lawful. If he rejected them, rival branches could claim that every heir touched by Elthene's system lacked a valid birth certification, including him. Including the child now breathing against Tessara's chest. The blood is real, Tessara said. Blood does not settle succession, Elthene replied. Records do. The records are false. Then the crown built upon them is vulnerable. Kharven looked toward the witnesses. Can the births be recertified? The oldest woman answered carefully. With complete testimony from the attending midwives, lawful ownership of transferred fire, and acknowledgement from each royal branch. How long? Months. Elthene's voice remained calm. The succession council will not wait months once it learns the king carries non-royal memory and his physician's authority has been suspended. Kharven looked at Tessara. She knew what the court expected from her. Silence. A private compromise. A corrected record for this child while the older thefts remained buried for political peace. She adjusted the infant against her shoulder. I will not repair one birth by agreeing to erase the others. Elthene reached into the charter case and removed a final folded clause. It bore the seals of the 6 royal branches. If physician continuity is declared unlawful, she said, the branches may invoke immediate review of the reigning line. Kharven broke the fold. The clause required a crown hearing before sunrise. If he defended the old charter, his throne remained secure. If he condemned it, House Sol could remove him before the birth records were rewritten. Tessara watched him read the choice his own authority had preserved. By dawn, Kharven could keep the crown or tell the truth about what had kept him alive. He could not do both without forcing the kingdom to change. Before sunrise, the 6 royal branches entered the red glass birthing vault to decide whether Kharven Sol still had the right to rule them. They came carrying sealed claims, succession witnesses, and the quiet confidence of people who had expected fear to make the king protect the old record. Kharven stood without his crown. Tessara remained beside the newborn, whose breathing had steadied into a small, stubborn rhythm. The child was alive, but she would not use that life as proof that the system had caused no harm. Elthene Quor stood before the physician archive in white gold robes, her private renewal records spread across the tables behind her. The Western Lord spoke first. If the king rejects the medical authority that certified his birth, his legitimacy becomes uncertain. The mountain branch added, if the current heir was restored under a decree written by a banished midwife, that decree may also be challenged. Tessara looked at the 6 branch representatives. Each of your heirs is breathing with fire returned under that same decree. One woman avoided her gaze. Another said, we do not dispute the result. We dispute the authority. That is how this began, Tessara replied. You accepted the work while refusing authority to the women who performed it. Kharven placed the emergency birth charter on the judgment plate. The old certifications will not remain lawful merely because exposing them threatens my throne. Elthene's voice carried through the vault. Then you admit the reigning line was built upon invalid medical records. I admit the records concealed theft. The distinction will not prevent a succession war. No, Kharven said. But preserving the lie would guarantee that every future heir could be divided whenever a physician called the sacrifice necessary. The branch lords exchanged looks. Elthene had chosen her argument well. She did not defend renewal for herself. She defended stability, frightened children, guarded borders, and the terror of 6 territories losing recognized heirs. Tessara understood why the system had lasted. Cruelty rarely survived 30 years by calling itself cruelty. It called itself continuity. The oldest birth witness approached the center table. There is a lawful path, she said. Not a quick one. All eyes turned to her. The births can be recertified through complete witness accounts. The transferred fire must be named. Every donor must be recorded. Every living heir must consent when old enough, or be represented by 2 independent birth witnesses until then. The Western Lord said, that process could weaken our claims for months. It will make them honest for generations, Tessara replied. A younger branch representative looked toward Kharven. And during recertification? Who holds the crown? Kharven removed the royal signet from his hand. The court shifted. He placed it beside the ruined remains of Tessara's midwife seal. I will hold administrative authority under witness limitation. No succession decree, bloodline transfer, or royal birth law will carry my seal alone until the recertification is complete. Elthene's composure tightened. You would reduce the Dragon King to a temporary custodian. I became dangerous when I mistook an unchallenged seal for informed authority. He turned toward the 6 branches. 3 birth witnesses, 2 elected midwives, and 1 representative from each affected branch will review every royal birth record. My own record first. The Mountain Lord objected. A king cannot place tradeswomen over the crown. Tessara answered before Kharven could. Then let your heir return the memory. Fire that kept him alive. The man went silent. Kharven looked at the witnesses. Write the order. The new birth charter was drafted on red scale parchment. The royal physician lost exclusive control over birth certification, emergency transfer, and medical archives. Midwives gained equal witness authority, the legal right to refuse unsafe commands, and ownership over every memory they chose to give. No royal fire could be stored without a named return condition. No emergency clause could define an unborn child as expendable. Elthene, read each line. You are dismantling the structure that preserved this house. No, Tessara said. We are dismantling the structure that made preservation depend on someone remaining uncounted. Kharven signed last. The molten scale register did not flare, bow, or pronounce judgment. Its bronze plates simply accepted the new authority. Then it opened the royal birth ledger. One by one, the old entries changed. Successful physician intervention became lawful memory contribution by named midwives. Excess fire became removed air fire. Residue became personal memory. Tessara Brune's name appeared beside every royal child she had steadied. Not servant, not failed midwife. Witness and donor by consent. The 7-headed seal Kharven had melted did not restore itself. Tessara would not have trusted a miracle that erased what he had done. The oldest midwife gathered the ruined bronze and placed it in Tessara's palm. You decide what it becomes. Tessara closed her fingers around it. Elthene was stripped of medical command pending a public hearing. She did not confess. She continued insisting that history would remember her as the woman who had chosen 6 heirs over 1 weak branch. Tessara faced her. History will record that you kept deciding whose life counted because no one with equal authority stood beside you. The guards escorted Elthene from the vault. No one applauded. Justice did not return stolen summers. Forgotten voices, or the warmth lost from women's hands. It only stopped the taking from continuing unnamed. Weeks later, the first recertification hearing began with Kharven's birth. He sat before Tessara without crown or armor while she described the memory she had given him and the fragment taken afterward. When the record was complete, the molten thread between them loosened. Her husband's last summer returned not as a perfect scene, but as sunlight on her skin and rough fingers holding hers. Tessara wept once. Kharven did not touch her. After the hearing, he waited outside the new midwife's council chamber. "You do not need permission to enter your own palace," she said. "I am not asking as king." She looked at him for a long moment. "What are you asking?" "To remain where you can see whether my choices change." "That is not forgiveness. I know. It may never become love again." His face held the cost of hearing it. "I know that too." Tessara opened the chamber door. She did not invite him across the threshold, but she did not close it. Behind her, the rewritten birth ledger carried every name the crown had once erased. And for the first time in House Sol's history, royal heirs would inherit fire without inheriting silence.